city, I've been browsing. Treading water that they drowning. My head on the swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 97 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. Joined as always by my co-hosts Mung and Adam. And guys, we have a great show for you tonight. You know, there's so much that happened today. Obviously, Trey Lance, you know, it's officially Trey Lance season. He gets named there. Debo shows up to camp. You know, we get all these different information. To me, the 101 of news today was basically Aaron Rodgers showing up to Kate as Nicolas Cage, you know, from Con Air. Just awesome time of the year. You know, most teams are reporting to camp in the next day or two, and I'm just super excited to talk about Superflex. We're going to talk about quarterbacks. We're really going to hit the position hard, talk about the philosophy tonight because we have some great guests on. Before we get to them, I definitely want to, and Mung, I'm going to transition it to you, but we got to talk about our sponsor, draftkits.co, that's .co. If you guys go there on their website, put code SMASH, you get 10% off. They have the best draft boards. I got the Trey Lance sticker up there, 1-inch stickers, some of the biggest ones in the game. Again, they are the unofficial sponsor of Scott Fishbowl this year. Their draft boards are taking off. You guys got to get these really to just tie your whole room together. Mung, it is Trey Lance season. You know, we knew it was going to happen. Today's the day. How's that making you feel?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's been paying attention the last few months should never have had that in doubt, right? It was kind of ludicrous to me that some were worried about Garoppolo starting when it was pretty clear that he was still on the roster due to the unexpected surgery. And going back to Aaron Rodgers real quick, I think the best tweet I saw all day, you know, we got some Isaiah McKenzie hype, some Sky Moore hype, some Trey Lance hype, but the best tweet I saw today was with the Aaron Rodgers Con Air Nick Cage picture with the quote that said, you know, there's only two men I trust. One is me, the other is not you. And that's what Rodgers is saying to Alan Lazard right now in training camp. So a little bit of the Lazard hate. But, yeah, I'm excited to talk with these guys. A lot to go over. And it's officially football season now that training camp hype videos are starting.
There you go. Adam, again, thanks for coming on the show. You know, super excited. You and I over the last couple months have really, you know, formed a friendship here. And a lot of it has been talking over Superflex philosophy, you know, and bouncing things on there since you joined Smash 3. So I'm excited to chop it up with you here tonight. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on and looking forward to hashing it out with the fellas. And yeah, it's really good to talk about philosophy with Superflex positions and kind of looking into the new year. I'm pumped.
So a couple weeks back, we had Mike Garay from the Trading Tables podcast. Tonight we have both hosts of the podcast. Super excited. Mike, that's at Dynasty. Zoltan, welcome to the show. How you doing today? I love that Mac Jones jersey you got on. Mute.
Thanks for that.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, my bad. I had to represent the Mac Jones jersey, future Super Bowl MVP, following the footsteps of Tom Brady. Heard it here first.
And for the first time on the show, you know, longtime friend, you and I have like hit it off since day one on Twitter. You know, Dynasty Jacobian. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thrilled to be on with you guys. And, you know, I'm repping my Josh Jacobs jersey, and I'll put it out like it's a little more realistic that he's RB1 overall this year than Mac Jones is a Super Bowl MVP. So, excited to chop it up with you guys and talk about some Superflex strategy tonight.
Jacob, before we go any further, you know, we already had Mike on before. Talk to me a little bit about your podcast, because I know it's got some similarities to ours, but some differences as well. So, you know, right now, give a little bit of plug. You know, it's a fantastic podcast. I listen to it. I play in several leagues with both of you guys. You guys are some of the finest dynasty minds out there. But tell our listeners, you know, some of the things that you guys got going on.
Yeah, so Mike and I play two totally different games. He's an analytical guru, he's a freak in the spreadsheets, as we'll say, but I'm more of a film guy. I go off my gut a lot. I follow market trends and play the market a little bit, and we actually converge a lot on a lot of players. So a lot of our podcasts, we're just talking about how we go about trades, what we think of trades we've done, and also just like what's going on in football generally, like how the transactions in the NFL are impacting market values.
I love it. I mean, that's what's great is when you can bring out, like Mung and I look at things totally different, but when we break down trades and how we look at things, I think that's what people like to hear, like they want to hear both sides of it. And when you both come to the same conclusion, that's when you know it's a smash accept. That's the guy that you're trying to go there for. So the first thing I want to talk about, I want to go quickly around the room and just talk to me briefly about your Superflex philosophy. I mean, myself personally, I'm that guy that likes to move back into that tier 3-4 range and load up on, the Jalen Hurts types, the Justin Fields, the Stafford, those kind of guys, maybe even Tua, and move back and try to accumulate value in the startup. A lot of guys in the Smash Patreon mock me quite a bit because I have 5 different quarterbacks that I roll with, pretty much. It's Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson. Those are the core of the guys that I have on my team based off the values that I got them for, how much I paid, and just finding things in that area. I like to invest in the position in the rookie draft rather than really paying up. That we're going to talk about that a lot, how much guys right now are trying to buy Josh Allen and buy Justin Herbert, and it's just you've kind of passed that window of making your team a complete contender to do that. Mung, talk to me a little bit about your Superflex philosophy, some things that, rules that you go by, and then we're going to kind of go around to Zoltan, Jacob, and then close it out with Adam.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember with any type of different scoring setting is it's very much league dependent, right? I've played in some Superflex startups where a lot of the league had not played in a Superflex format. And in those types of leagues, you can get away with drafting quarterbacks later because a lot of times they tend to fall. And then also when you're trading for quarterbacks, you might not be paying quite as big a premium as you might be in a more experienced Superflex league where quarterback values are always very high. So I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind. But when you are playing in a Superflex format with more experienced players, I do think it's important to come away from that startup draft with at least one strong quarterback who has a good hold on the starting job, and if not 2 or 3 more, then at least future round picks where you have the capital to draft some quarterbacks early on.
Love it. And I know we talk about that a lot. League size matters. The settings matter. That's great points there. Mike, we're gonna pass it over to you.
Yeah, I would say I really like to focus in on having basically as many good quarterbacks as possible. I found that they're the most valuable form of currency in most Superflex leagues. Basically, if you don't have 2 starting quarterbacks, you're not going to win a Superflex league unless you have, Amon-Ra St. Brown week 16 going off in the Superflex. So I like having one absolute stud and usually 2 to 3 players maybe in their first 2 to 3 years in the NFL with some upside who I can kind of plug and play. But I always like having either 4 or 5 quarterbacks. So when one contender loses their starting quarterback, they know they have to come to me and I can really squeeze them for a premium.
I like that as well. Jacob, aside from just getting as much Tua action as possible, how do you attack the Superflex position?
Yeah, so I guess Tua is a good segue into the most important thing for me when I'm looking at quarterbacks in the Superflex is solidifying my quarterback 2 position. I know a lot of people like to focus in on your top tier elite quarterbacks, and it's always great if you can land a Lamar, a Kyler, a Herbert, or a Mahomes. But one of the most undervalued things in Superflex, in my opinion, is when you can have a consistent high-end quarterback 2 where you don't have to worry about adjusting your roster for a long time, because oftentimes like dynasty players will be bored of those guys and they'll come at a cheaper price tag. So it gives you more liquidity to focus on the other aspects of your roster. And then you just don't have to worry about your quarterback 2. Later, if I end up accruing value, I'll hopefully trade up and have 2 elite quarterbacks. But if I can get a Derek Carr in the 9th round, like we were able to last year, knowing he's going to be a starting quarterback for 3, 4, 5 years at least, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, as soon as you started talking about that, Derek Carr was the first guy that popped to mind, and it's like that value. There's a lot of guys that just we don't necessarily value the certain way, but they put up the points. You know what I mean? And they're that solid QB2 option. They're not that sexy Josh Allen, but it's a guy that's going to go out there and put up points for you week in and week out. Adam, I kind of saved you for last there. I know that's kind of a little bit trickier after everybody's kind of shared theirs, but talk to me a little bit about your Superflex strategy.
Yeah, so very similar to what was just spoken. So I'll just add a couple extra things. Is to that second QB. I'm also looking, really for and both of the QBs trying to. I generally don't have your top tier guys, your top three. I'm generally trading down in insulated trades if I can to try to get additional appreciation. So that's probably something I do for really all positions, but especially QBs. Back to Zoltan's point of, if you can try to, because if you're just holding Allen and Mahomes, it's great to have those too. But if you can insulate them, get similar types of points, especially, QB1 and QB2, you can talk. That's where you build a dynasty. So that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do, right? Is certainly get the points, but you're trying to appreciate and value over time, especially on the hit. So I'll just kind of position that I'm always trying to get your tier 3, tier 4 guys that have that upside of QB1 while trying to accumulate picks or other positional values of value.
I love it. I mean, I know Jacob, Mike, myself, and Adam. I know, and Mung somehow stays clear of of startup season. He's like, maybe one more. The rest of us are kind of degenerates and just kind of roll in there. I swear, Jacob, you have a new draft going on every single week. You got another one coming up here. But talk to me a little bit about, we all know tier 1 is, it's Josh Allen, it's Mahomes, Herbert. Everybody loves those guys. The positional advantage you have of drafting them, although, as well as like moving out of that spot, the amount of value that you can accumulate in a draft. Are you guys, hey, I'm going to draft Josh Allen now? Or is this a move where it's like, hey, I'm going to move back? Because one thing I've seen in every single draft is if I get that 101, that 102, 103, I am moving back to 17, 18, even 112, even like mid-second to just accumulate a haul right off the bat. Because I've done that where I've moved back from Josh Allen in the one league. I was able to move back to get Kyler and then another pick to upgrade massively, where I got a 23 first, a couple upgrades in there, and it's just, I feel like there's such an advantage right now to be in those top 3. Talk to me a little bit about how you guys attack that early part of the draft.
So I guess I'm never going to force a trade, so I'm totally happy taking Allen, Mahomes, and Herbert, but that's never been my issue. I'm not afraid to, I guess the best way that I approach it is openly advertise that I'm willing to trade back pretty far. I can go down from an Allen to a Justin Fields to get a bigger plus on top, because I realistically don't want that much value consolidation right at the start of a startup. So I think just being flexible with what you're willing to do and how you're willing to move really opens the door to many different pathways of gaining value. And at the end of the day, it's just about getting the most value you possibly can.
Yeah, and I mean, Zoltan, we talked on when you came on last time, and sorry, sometimes I call you Mike, sometimes I call you Zoltan, honestly, but when we had you on here to talk about the year 1 punt, and Adam just did one in Smash Accept 6, when you have those top 3, the amount of capital, because everybody wants to get up there, right? It's hard to force people to want to get up to 4, 5, 6, in that area, but if you have 1, 2, and 3 in a Superflex startup, these guys are clearly a head above everybody in the tier. They're above Taylor. They're above Chase. They're above all the other quarterbacks here. I feel like there's such a positional advantage here. You at least have to kick the tires and try to make some moves there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 9 times out of 10, I would move back either into the Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray range, try to get an extra first or, 6th round startup pick, or even move further back. I'm always trying to move back in a startup. I think it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to build your team. The farther you kick the can down the road, you don't have to commit to a certain build. But the one thing I will say about those top 3 quarterbacks is because their longevity is the next, 15 years, everyone wants them. So whether it's a rebuilder or a contender, it's okay if you just take one of those players and end up trading them later in the draft or even closer to the season, because they will still have value and appeal to basically all 11 other teams in your league. So it's not the end of the world doing that. It's not like drafting Jonathan Taylor where only the win now teams will actually want to trade for them. So definitely try to move back, but those 3 guys are top 3 in the tier of their own for a reason. So don't be afraid to take them because they will hold value.
Yeah. Adam, we were talking about these 3 guys here. Talk to me a little bit about, where you're comfortable moving back. I mean, I think Jacob made a great point. If you move back to Fields in that, mid-secondary, you're adding some serious capital. If you move back into the later first, getting Kyle, Lamar, Burrow, you get to the end of the first where you get, Jalen, you get Jalen Hurts or you get Trey Lance in that area. How comfortable are you moving back from, say, Josh Allen? And what are some moves that you're looking to make?
Yeah, so I'm with these gentlemen is that trying to find read the room. Right, this is the first thing, right? Because so when I just in Smash 6, just for context, I had the 4th pick, ended up getting Kyler, and but before then I opened up the door and said, hey, if anybody wants it, I'm looking to trade down. Didn't have any interest initially, so I ended up just taking the best available. So I would say that's the first thing is don't force it. So just to reconfirm that. And then number 2 is certainly looking for those positional values where, to your point, I think, I don't like to go late second, because if you go from that top 2 tiers to the late second, like your tier 5, we'll get into the tiers in a bit, everybody. But if you're going down to like your max, right, or even further, I've seen trades like that, and you're not getting compensated generally with multiple firsts in that situation. So I would just say that I'm generally shooting for you're going from a tier 1, tier 2 down to like a tier 3, tier 4. So what I ended up doing is going from Kyler to Lance, Mung's boys. So that's those guys with that upside, the QB1 upside, as I mentioned earlier, but with they're generally going to have either age considerations, or they're going to have like Russ, for example, right, or Jalen's situation. So at the end of the day, I'm always looking for those values. But if it's not there, as mentioned, fire away with the best player available and then work it in the draft. So I ended up trading him later, but that's kind of my strategy as well, just to make sure you're working the room, but you're also trying to max out your value with the insulation.
Mung, anything to add to that, that top tier? I mean, we had our Superflex show. We really went over each tier, but I mean, that tier is clearly a cut above. Anything else to add to that as far as trade values, as far as moving around here a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of good stuff's already been covered by these guys. So I'll just say, an analogy that's used very often in Dynasty is, comparing Dynasty leagues to the stock market, right? When you're talking about a Josh Allen, Mahomes, that tier, you're looking at a quote-unquote blue chip tech stock that you expect to maintain value pretty much forever, versus, it really comes down to how much do you know your stuff, right? And I guess shameless plug, if you guys are listening to the podcast and you're trying to get good information on which stocks could rise, like a Tesla, like a Trey Lance type, who you're not paying that premium blue chip price, but who have a chance to get up into that sort of valuation, right? Jalen Hurts too, somewhat risky because of that, the lack of job security, depending on how he does in 2022. But if he shows well, then all of a sudden he is in that Lamar Jackson tier, right? He is in that close to Josh Allen tier. So a lot of it is managing that risk. And I think you can play around with these QB values if you go after the guys you believe in, whether it's Tua or Carr or some of these slightly cheaper guys, or even if you believe Aaron Rodgers is going to play at a high level for another 5-6 years, which I personally do not, but then that's your guy who you can get way cheaper and still find that same level of top tier production. So really it comes down to being flexible too, just depending on what your league mates are willing to pay if you are looking to trade down, because sometimes you're just not getting good deals. So just take Josh Allen.
All right, so we talked about how we would look in a draft. Now let's talk about a trade here. I mean, we're going to start with you guys from trading tables. You guys just jump in there, which one you're looking for. And we got a trade sent in from Trevor Reed. That's at Sask Trevor. 12-team Superflex, 4-point passing touchdowns. Two of the pieces, I mean, is Damian Pierce and Al Jair. I'm going to throw those out. He was able to deal Justin Herbert for Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. Twitter has this at almost dead even, 51-49, 51% in the Herbert. Jacob, if you're given that opportunity of Justin Herbert or Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, which side are you taking here?
I'm taking the two quarterbacks by a wide margin, because I think Jalen Hurts in particular, with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith this year, Dallas Goedert as well, he could finish above Justin Herbert. That's a realistic outcome. And so you're talking about another quarterback, Justin Fields, who's an incredible prospect. I mean, he was a little disappointing as a rookie, but he had no weapons. And he had Matt Nagy calling plays. So, sky's the limit for Justin Fields. So you're already getting back a high floor player in Jalen Hurts who has upside, and then you're adding a good prospect with a ton of upside on top of that. I think that's a no-brainer. And in terms of value, what's the difference between Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert? Maybe a first. So is Justin Fields worth less than a first? That's where I'm saying no, Justin Fields is worth more than that. Clear win for the two quarterbacks, in my opinion.
I had to double check to see if it wasn't just a retweet that was like 3 months old, 4 months old. It was 2 days ago, and I think Jalen Hurts has just risen to a point where, to me, this was an absolute smash accept. To Twitter, on over 400 votes, we're looking at 51-49. Zoltan, we started talking about, I have Herbert in the one league, and you and I started talking Lance, at least kicking the tires a little bit here. In this particular situation, getting two upside quarterbacks with both Fields and Hurts, which side are you taking?
Yeah, I got to agree with Jacob. I'm taking the two quarterbacks. I mean, you look at even last season, Jalen Hurts only scored 2 fewer points a game, and that was in 5 points per passing touchdown leagues than Justin Herbert. I assume in 4 points per passing touchdown, they basically had the same amount of points. So you're getting a second quarterback. Justin Fields, we talked about his upside, top 5 in big-time throw rate last year. Obviously in a tough situation right now, but I'm easily taking the two. I like to always think of things in startup value, and if you're getting basically 2 second-round picks for 1 first-round pick, it's really just a good explanation of why holding a guy like Justin Herbert can be almost detrimental to your team, because there's nowhere to go but down for a guy like that. And if you can turn him into solving your both of your quarterback spots, it feels like a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I'm going to really hit on Fields a little bit later. But, Mung, you and I both also answered another Twitter poll today that it was, and this is just, I'm putting this out there so you guys can know, if you have Mahomes or Herbert, and I think Allen's value's higher than either of them. But if you have Mahomes and Herbert, I saw a trade today, you and I both commented on it. It was CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, and a 23 first for Justin Herbert. Now, I know you had mentioned in there that Justin Herbert is that centerpiece, right? He is that guy that you want to build your team around. But when you get trade offers like that, it's real hard to say no. Am I wrong, Mung?
Yeah, when you just look at it from a pure value standpoint, right? 2023 first-round rookie picks are already in such high demand. Those valuations are already so high. And you're looking at 2 wide receivers who can still fetch a 2023 plus in many leagues. So when you look at it from that point, you're basically getting 4 to 5 firsts in terms of value for Herbert at that point, and just very few players are really worth that and will maintain that value for years and years. So just looking at it from pure value, it's a smash accept.
We talked about that, in years past, they used to say that Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, this top tier would be worth 4 firsts. Because the 23 class is that special, are we comfortable giving up 3 firsts? I am for Allen, but I'm not quite comfortable giving up 3 firsts for Mahomes or Herbert, and that's a hard ask because that class is so good. Adam and the rest of you guys chime in afterwards. Are there any players worth 4 firsts? I feel like Josh Allen's the only thing close, but I'm not giving more than 3 firsts for anybody other than him at this stage of the game, Adam.
Yeah, personally, going back to the philosophy that I have, I'm never paying that regardless, because, going back to this idea of insulation and upside, right? If you have 4 firsts, you are getting guaranteed upside and guaranteed insulation, whereas I don't care what player you're talking about, you won't have that same combination of insulation and upside. So I will never do that regardless of the player. And I know that's a wide berth of thing to say, but I just think that's too rich regardless of how amazing Allen is with points, upside, and insulation on himself. But it's not guaranteed. An injury can happen, right? Coach changes, anything can happen. So there is a point of, think of it from a statistical analysis perspective. It's very high probability he's going to stay in his top tier. But I would say there is an outside chance, whereas those picks, there is a 0 chance they are going down, right? Absolutely. So that's the way I look at it. Is it's again looking at if I can trade down, get more of those insulated trades that your coin phrase, Dad, right? That's the best way that you can protect yourself while also looking to appreciate your assets.
Exactly. Guys, am I wrong to say that? Is anybody willing to pay up 4 firsts? I mean, I feel like if you can, the highest I've seen 3 for Allen, but I think Mahomes and Herbert are almost like I would need to have one of them early, but I feel like 3 is probably a stretch at this stage in the game.
Not for me. I think a lot of what Adam said is kind of the way that I think about it. Not only are the firsts not going to go down in value, but if you hit on, let's say one of those firsts turns into a player who's going to be a first round startup pick, and 2 of the other ones turn into 5th and 6th round startup picks, you've already increased in value by a significant amount, right?
Yeah.
The fact that Josh Allen is the most expensive player in the game means that he can't go up anymore, right? There's never going to be a player averaging 35 fantasy points a game who's worth 6 firsts. So really, you actually are protecting your floor as well because you have 4 of them. So I would not trade 4 for anyone. I probably wouldn't trade 3 for Josh Allen.
Well, and now's not the time. I mean, just a cautionary tale. This is not the year to do it. We know how special 2023 is. Very comparable to 2022. In 2019, on a rebuilding team, I traded Mahomes for 3 firsts. One of them turned out to be the 101, Joe Burrow. One of them was the 106, DeAndre Swift. The other was the 111, if you remember, Mr. Justin Herbert was falling to that area now. So if you look at that trade, at this stage in the game, and we talk about how special 2023 could be. So the next thing I want to do is I want to drop down to tier 2. This is an area I have it labeled as Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. We're going to play a little, Wolf of Wall Street. Sell me your pen. Who's the guy out of this group that you guys want to have out of it? Because it seems to be very split the whole way across the group, across Twitter. I mean, there's guys that prefer one way or another. Let's start with you, Mung. If you had to choose between Kyler, Lamar, and Burrow, who's that guy you're going here and why?
Yeah, for me, it's Lamar Jackson. We've seen, his floor and ceiling. We know that the rushing production is going to be there. And we know that even though, the Ravens haven't yet signed him to a mega deal like Kyler Murray just got, that's coming at some point, right? Whether it's the Ravens or someone else, he's going to get a mega contract. And hopefully without the clause of having to do his film study like in Kyler's contract. Although I do think that story is getting a little bit overblown for entertainment purposes. But, I mean, overall, Kyler just worries me slightly more because of stature and potential injuries. And for me, the top 10 floor is there for Lamar with top 3 ceiling every single year as long as he's on the field.
Yeah, I mean, and Kyler's got to do his homework now, right? New contract. He's got to study for 4 hours, try to get things in there. Jacob, who's your guy out of this group? I mean, this is a tough section because a lot of people really love Burrow, the way he's ascended there. We've got the rushing upside of Kyler and Lamar. If you got to pick one of these guys, who's it going to be?
For me, it's Kyler. It's close between Kyler and Lamar. Just for me, I think Kyler is one of the best pure runners in the game. He's an incredibly intelligent runner. He knows how to get down really quickly and avoid contact, which is actually a big difference between him and Lamar, who has one of the highest hit rates of any player in the NFL. So I would like to push back a little bit on Kyler being more injury prone than Lamar. Lamar hasn't been injured in his career really that much, and Kyler has, but that might be coincidental rather than predictive. Kyler has this cannon of an arm, and we know that they're going to air it out in Arizona. He's got Marquise Brown, who is his wide receiver 1 back in college. I'm excited for him this year, see how he develops as a decision maker in the pass game. I'd like to see him be more decisive as a runner, take off more like Lamar does. I think Lamar has a safer floor for that reason, but I think Kyler's upside is unmatched.
And Mike and Adam, we're gonna move into tier 3. But before we do that, I want you guys not just to give me your analysis on that. I'm gonna let you guys analyze on tier 3. But if you had to choose right now, who's your guy? Start with you, Mike.
For me, it's Lamar pretty comfortably.
And Adam?
Yeah, Kyler for me. Just more of the accuracy is what is the tiebreaker for me. But I get the argument.
So out of this group, none of us picked Joe Burrow, and I do not either. Moving down into tier 3, and I go based off of value when I do my tiers, where the market is, where people are viewing things. That next tier of Dak, Jalen Hurts, Trey Lance, and Russ Wilson, I would much rather be in that area than Joe Burrow because I feel like you can add yourself a second-round pick easily on top of that. Is anyone seeing a lot of value going on with Joe Burrow? I mean, Joe Burrow typically goes 105, 106 in every single draft. I've seen him go all the way at 3. Jacob, I mean, I love Joe Burrow. I love the Joe Burr. I love the amount of swag the guy has. I love the weapons he has. The rushing upside isn't quite the same. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen trending.
So he's a late first round pick right now, and I don't like being in that area. I'd rather trade way farther down to maybe tier 4 of the quarterbacks rather than tier 3, because the difference between Burrow and Dak, Jalen Hurts, Lance, and Russ for me is a combination of things. You have Burrow, who has 2 superstar wide receivers in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and a pretty heavy pass volume offense. Mm-hmm. And you see Dak, who just lost Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup has injury questions. He's a little bit older. Jalen Hurts has to prove himself as a passer. Trey Lance hasn't played really yet, and Russ is older. So those are all pretty big differences for me that puts Burrow more than a second above the rest. So if I'm moving off Burrow, I'm going farther down. And I'm also not looking to hold on to Burrow because, as you said, I think his value is at a high point right now, and it's probably only going to go down.
No, I love that. We started going on that. I mean, let's chime in here a little bit. What kind of value are we having to pay to go from that tier 2 to tier 3? I mean, Mike, if someone comes to you and they have Kyler Murray, or I know you like to trade backwards, not the other way around. You have Kyler Murray. How much do you need to move back to Dak, to Jalen, to Lance, to Russ?
I actually have Dak a tier above the rest, just in my own personal rankings.
Okay.
Above those other guys. But if I'm moving back to, let's say, Russell Wilson, I'm going to be expecting a first in that deal. Or let's say a wide receiver in the wide receiver 20 range. Let's say Sky Moore is going to be a guy that I would want added on to that, because you're losing a little bit of production year 1, and you're losing a lot of longevity moving down from a guy like Kyler or Lamar. To any of those guys that you talked about.
Mung, this is the beginning of fighting words. So if we're going from Kyler and Lamar to Trey Lance, how much of a difference are we talking here? Before we really just blow up on Trey Lance and really just kind of look in on his price check, what value difference is there in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, and this is where there's always differences in the market between buyers and sellers, right? Where I obviously want that first if I can get it, but I don't know how many are willing to pay the first from Russell Wilson to Joe Burrow. And actually, I think they're pretty equal for me. So I think these 2 tiers are pretty muddled depending on where people have these quarterbacks ranked. And honestly, that's where you want to try and gain value, right? Like, obviously, I'm a big Trey Lance proponent. We've been over this time and time again. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to pay some exorbitant price to get him, right? I have him in the leagues I have, and as the hype has grown, I'm not trying to acquire more for just absolute crazy prices, versus if I'm selling and I can get Lance plus, then I would do that in a heartbeat for, if I'm selling Burrow or Lamar and I'm getting Trey Lance plus a first, I'm very happy to do that. So it really comes down to, even like Mike and Jacob were saying, it depends on your personal rankings and where you can extract value and the differences from ADP to your rankings.
I love it. And a lot of guys were asking that, like, should I trade this quarterback for this quarterback even? And no matter what, you got to gauge the room. You got to see where the other person's at. If you're going, we were talking about, if you're going from Burrow to Dak, some people have them very similar. Others, it's a matter of like, hey, why don't I just offer that straight up? No, get a wide receiver who you believe in more versus who they have, and a lot of times you can win a deal where both sides think they're definitely winning that deal, and you get a lot more value in there. Mike, you had alluded to Dak. Is that your guy here in tier 3? I mean, I know you said you would have him up there in tier 2 based off production that he's had in the past. Is that your guy out of this group for sure?
Well, my guy's actually the elephant in the room, Deshaun Watson.
I like it. I put him in tier 4. All right, let's go there. I definitely want to do it because you put a post out that I loved. It was a tweet, said week 7, let's say Deshaun Watson served his 6-week suspension, no future legal issues. Where would you take him in a Superflex startup? And you said which one of the tiers, and you said you had him right there. The Twitter poll has tier 1, which is Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, 11%. Tier 2 have him at Kyler, Lamar, Burrow, which is tier, in that spot, 56%, 23% into tier 3 with the Dak, Lance. So let's talk about Watson here, because that is definitely the elephant in the room. You had the tweet, so I'm going to let you take over. Mung's been pounding the drum. We were talking about buying low on this show for months for Deshaun Watson. Now he's back down there, right? He went all the way up into second round startup value, even late first. Now we talk the suspension's actually going to potentially come. Talk to me a little bit about the tweet and let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tweet was incredibly revealing for me because that tier 2 that he's in, according to Twitter, is between the 104 and the 110 in startups. And he's never going to go in the first round of a startup, at least not one that I've seen this offseason. No. So you're getting a lot of value there. And of course, the tweet said after the suspension is served. But for me, if I'm looking at a quarterback where so much of their value is tied to the longevity, I don't really care about half the season. If we know his legal issues will be behind him after the suspension, then I don't really care. I'll just go get, pay up for Tom Brady to cover for him for half the season or something like that. Right. And then use that value advantage that I had to get a guy like Deshaun Watson. I mean, Deshaun Watson in his last healthy season averaged above 25 points a game. The only quarterback who's averaged that much in the last 3 years is Lamar Jackson. So he belongs in really that tier 1 if it wasn't for his legal issues. So if you're getting him at tier 2, it's already a discount. And right now you can probably get him at tier 4. So I'm all in on Watson at his cost.
And that's the key, at the cost now, right? And I think it's fantastic. Adam, I'm going to have you chime in here, but he is the ultimate year 1 punt quarterback right now. You can get, let's say you had Kyler Murray wherever you're at, you could get Kyler Murray and probably a 23 first or Deshaun Watson and a 23 first for Kyler Murray, and you're able to move into that because there's a lot of panicking owners out there right now that are just like, dude, I don't want him on my team. What if it's a full year suspension? Then that means he's out of football for 2 years. What if it's longer? Some people are thinking it's just money talks. He got paid. It's not going to be, a lifetime ban or anything like that. But Adam, I mean, you chose to build that way in your year 1 punt, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say Watson's a perfect. I mean, it's not just 1 year punt, but it's perfect for 1 year punt because you can buy him for at cost. And I cannot think of a player, regardless of position, that has not only the upside that Mike just talked about, but the path for the quickest way to get there. If you think about it, I really can't.
As soon
think
as
of
he steps
else.
on the field, right? It's
yeah,
not
exactly.
even a. Yeah.
So you're talking about, and he has insulation. He's super young, right? And the ability that Mike just covered, nailed it on the head. So for me, I ended up Kyler ended up getting Lance, and then I have him as my QB2 in a 1 year punt. It's exactly what I want because I'm okay with not doing the points. And one thing just more philosophically as well, with this value and also with the time of year is that we're getting, with now we're getting into the news, right? So more of your inexperienced players are thinking about points, right? And that is what is depreciating his value, because people are just worried about the variance of his suspension. But at the end of the day, if we're truly just looking to get price appreciation, whether or not you're going to hold him or thereafter or not, he's a great candidate for trying to get that quick upside if you want to flip him. Or in my position, I'm okay with keeping him because then I'm going to have him and Lance as my long QB1 and 2. So, but at the either way, he's a perfect candidate to get a quick flip, even if you're wanting to grab him. And then to Mike's point, I mean, you can easily get a Goff, you can get these guys that have really good floors, which is what you want from a QB2 while you're waiting for him to come back from suspension.
The other tweet I wanted to talk about that Zoltan put out there was he put it out, Breece Hall or Deshaun Watson. And 56% of the listeners said that they want Breece Hall over Deshaun Watson. Jacob, how risk adverse are you? Where are you at with Watson? And would you take Hall or Watson if you're in a startup right now?
In a start, it's so league dependent because a lot of people just won't touch Watson, period. But I'd go Watson because there's the other side of the coin where people view him among top quarterbacks. So Mike actually transitioned Breece Hall into Deshaun Watson share and then added a 23 second on top of Deshaun Watson and got Kyler Murray. So I think for that reason, it makes Deshaun Watson like this kind of asset where you can really take him whatever direction you want to go with him, whether it's break him down, hold on to him for a flip later down the road for more value, or even trade up into the top-notch quarterbacks that don't have the risk that Watson does. So I think for those reasons, I would take Watson over Hall, and then I would probably do the rare QB move up here because you will be able to find someone who has one of those top quarterbacks, and you won't have to add a ton to Watson to get them.
I absolutely love what you just said. I love that trade you made, Mike, because everybody that DMs me, and I get crazy amounts of DMs about trades, but when it comes to Deshaun Watson, what I've said is, dude, get Lamar, get Kyler, get one of these guys, give up a second-round pick for the peace of mind that you don't have to sit there and worry about it the entire time. And I love Watson, but let's be honest, if it's already been a full year, it could be a year and a half, there's definitely going to be some rust involved. And if you can give up a second-round pick and get a Kyler Murray, a Lamar Jackson in that area, then I'm fine with that. And that kind of makes it a situation where you're still going to get the production. You're using him as an asset. That's what we talk about all the time on this show, not necessarily the player, but the asset himself, and moving that and transitioning from one to the other. Mung, anything to add to Deshaun Watson? Because I know we talk about it a lot in the Smash Patreon. Jacob, you just joined in there too. And guys, it's just an awesome area for you guys to come in, talk fantasy football. I know when you first joined, Jacob, you were like, okay, let's check it out. Dude, it's crazy in there how much dialogue goes on and how awesome it is just for $12 a year, $1 a month. I mean, this is a quick plug. How much fun have you had in there so far?
It's a ton of fun, and it's like the best way to get instant responses on any trades or any ideas you're thinking of. Like wild opinions all over the place, people with different perspectives, a lot of insight. You think about things in a different way when you're just getting different takes. So it's a super active group. I'm having a ton of fun. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Just had to get that out there real quick. But Mung, anything else to tie in there with Watson? I mean, usually in the Patreon, you and I are on slightly different spectrums right now. Where I'm off Watson. I'm trying to move there. You've been on the buy-in side. Anything else to add to that?
Not really. I mean, if you look at my Superflex Dynasty rankings on Fantrax, he's been a first-round startup pick forever because we know that the suspension is coming at some point. But long-term, that value is still a top 12 Dynasty quarterback. And in Superflex, that's just such an easy value rise to project as soon as he steps on the field, right? I mean, it just is, because if he plays even, let's say, 4 games and he has decent games, the hype next offseason is going to build until he is at the very least an early second-round startup pick. And I've had questions the last few months asking if he's worth taking because he's still there in the 5th round of a Superflex startup. So, yeah, I mean, that I think we've covered enough on Watson.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and one quick thing I want to say about Hall, and this talks kind of Superflex strategy in general, is there is one running back who's going in the first round of startup drafts, and usually somewhere between 8 to 11 quarterbacks will go before the second running back. That tells you all you need to know about whether you should value Watson or Hall, because Watson has that ability to get to the top 5, top 6 overall. Hall does not likely have that ability. So at the very least, you have to take him for that purpose.
Especially in 12 and 14 team. The only time I start getting closer is when we get to 10. Because to me, in 10, the Superflex isn't quite as potent. 12's that optimal area. 14 is not even debatable. Like, your quarterbacks are so important. Like, literally, I think you get at least 10 in the first round. Like, guys just start pushing into that area. Let's transition a little bit over to Trey Lance here. Dave Hellman at Dynasty Dorks, he put a bunch of polls out there. Trey Lance versus Dak Prescott. 64% are on the Dak Prescott side right now. Trey Lance versus Russell Wilson, 57-43 for Lance. Jalen Hurts, 56-44. And, I mean, where do you guys have Trey Lance in your rankings? Now we obviously know he's going to be the starter. We knew that kind of going out there, but he's 22 years old, He's in that spot where he is the youngest of those elite assets. Jalen Hurts is 23. Fields is 23. Trevor Lawrence is 23. Jacob, I mean, how many, first off, how many, you're in a lot of leagues. How many shares do you believe you have of Lance? And if you don't have Lance, what are some guys that you're working into that area and some trades maybe you guys have made?
Yeah, so I keep finding myself trading for Lance and then flipping him because I get uncomfortable. Um, so
Well, yeah, and
I,
there's a tweet you put out that you just made a trade, right, with Dirty
yeah,
1187, and I think you'd flipped Trey Lance.
so I actually had two Trey Lance trades. There's that one, and then I also traded Trey Lance for DeAndre Swift in 23 second. Um, Trey Lance, I have as my quarterback 9 in my 33 leagues. I have him probably in about 4 of them. And with him, you just see a guy that oozes upside. He's got one of the biggest arms. He's obviously on a team with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and he can run for days. He's a big guy that's going to pound over people like Josh Allen does. The problem I have with Trey Lance is that he had one season at a sub D1 school. So how is he going to read defenses? I haven't seen him play against NFL defenses. It makes me super uncomfortable. I know how much the 49ers have invested in him. I understand that mitigates the risk. I believe in him. I think he has too much talent to fail, but it's not an asset I feel comfortable with. So if I can transition him into a Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, I'm going to do that all day. If not, I'm probably trying to make an insulated trade down to somebody I do feel comfortable with, like a Tua. I probably can get more than a 23 first on top of Tua for Trey Lance. And I'm going to do that every time.
I like it. Adam, you knew this was going to come up. You're in that punt, and you're offering me Trey Lance for 2 seconds. So talk to me about the value that you see in Trey Lance and the upside in those 23 firsts versus Trey Lance, and just a little bit about your thought process there.
Yeah, I was going to say 23 first. So, at the end of the day, I'm hesitant. But the other thing is going back to the values, and we've covered on the show, so I won't spend too much time of it. But with my Watson, I don't mind trying to kind of cash in on the Lance and get the guaranteed upside. Even though I love Lance, I would say I'm above market on him. Not quite to Mung's degree, but certainly above market, and that he's got that upside to. I mean, if he crushes this year, he's right up there in that tier 1, in my opinion. So he's got the upside. He's just, the variance with him is higher than within guys in that same tier. I would say similar to Hurts, at least from a variance standpoint. But yeah, I think my thought process is if I can get the 2 firsts, that insulates some of that risk. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about, and again, strategy and philosophy is trying to get upside, but also it's managing risk. So it's risk adjusted returns at the end of the day. So if I can get 2 firsts, it guarantees the upside and the floor again. So that's where I think it's worth it. But certainly I'm not going out of my way to sell him. So it's always trying to feel the room, like we've been talking about as well.
I like it. It's proud dad moment hearing about insulated trades. I had one Lance share, and surprisingly enough, I traded Lance and a late second for Jalen Hurts and a mid 23 first, and I'm perfectly fine with it because that's my guy, and that's how I play the position. Now, Mike, I know you have quite a bit more shares when it comes to Trey Lance. In multiple leagues that I'm in with you own him in both of those. Talk to me a little bit about some of the heat, some of the guys, some of the interest that you're getting from other owners, some of the trades that you've made, and some of those trade ideas that I know you definitely got brewing in your head.
Yeah, I've got a ton of Trey Lance. I have 14 shares in my 85 or so leagues, so I'm about double overweight on him. And that just comes from the fact that I have so many rookie picks all the time. I haven't traded for Trey Lance at all, but I have traded him away quite a bit because I'm getting offers of guys like Dak straight up, guys like Kyler and Lamar adding in an asset that I don't feel is important, a late second Nico Collins type guy. And to me, you eliminate all of the downside and have just as much upside with a guy like Lamar and Kyler. Because I think Trey Lance is talented and I love his ceiling, but it's also possible he's not starting in 2025. So you really do have to mitigate some of that downside if you can. The other thing I found with Trey Lance is you can often switch him for one of the tier 5 quarterbacks, whether it's a Hurts or Fields or even like a Derek Carr, and get an elite player at a different position. So one trade I recently made was I traded Trey Lance for Derek Carr and T. Higgins. For me, I feel like I'm getting arguably just as much just as many points out of the position with Carr. Obviously less upside, but I really solidify my floor there, and I'm getting a stud at another position. So those are the types of trades you can really make. To me, I have Trey Lance at the top of a tier with Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, etc. But I would typically be looking to either move up or down off of him.
Can you elaborate on something you said? You said you're double weight on Trey Lance. So do you keep a certain? I know you keep spreadsheets, and Jacob? You said he's a freak in the spreadsheets. I love that. But talk to me about what you meant by that.
Yeah, so basically, if you are in, let's keep it simple. If you're in 24 leagues and each of them are 12 teams, the expected ownership of a given player would be 2 shares of a player, right? If you had 1 in every 12 leagues you're in. So with Trey Lance, I have 14 in 85 leagues. That means essentially I have, 18%, while average would be about 8.5%. So I have double as much Trey Lance as if I was like average on the market for him. And that's just something I like to keep track of. A guy like Trey Lance, who I am not higher on than market, I'm going to look at that and say, if I'm not higher on him, why do I have more of him? Maybe it's time to shop him around a little bit.
Mung, I'm going to let you close it out here because I got that offer there from Adam. 223. Looks like maybe one is mid and one is late. Is that a smash accept? Should we be good in that situation? The only reason I haven't done it is because I have Jalen Hurts, Tom Brady, Baker, and Winston. So I got 4 quarterbacks in there. But I think Lance is just a hot commodity, kind of like Watson, where once he gets on the field, he's going to put up points.
Yeah, and I've used this analogy a lot of times as we talked about Lance over the offseason, and however you value Jalen Hurts is how you should value Lance plus, because he's Hurts with job security, right? Because even if you think that Lance is absolutely going to suck as a passer, and I think we've seen good things from his college tape, albeit a very limited sample size to think that he can be a good passer. But for argument's sake, let's say he's awful and he becomes a game manager like Jimmy Garoppolo in a good offense run by Kyle Shanahan with a good Niners defense. They're going to win games. They're not going to be drafting another quarterback. He has job security for the next 2 to 3 seasons at the very least, in my opinion. And then, again, even if he's not the greatest passer, we saw with Jalen Hurts last year that as long as he's rushing for touchdowns and for that yardage, he's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback at the very least. I think that's his floor. And his ceiling is jumping into that top tier with the Allens and Lamars and Mahomes. So to me, he's not only a high ceiling prospect, he's also a high floor asset. And that's why I'm so high on him. So I think if you're trading him for 2023 draft capital, I need at least one of those first to be a top 2-3 pick based on how people are going to value Stroud or Young. So I want at least one of those guys plus in return for Lance.
I like it. So in the same, let's talk about that last year's class, because right now Lance has that value. We've kind of moved Lawrence back. He's in that mid-second area. Fields I've seen been slipping into the late second. And even Zach Wilson's on the rise here, and Mac Jones. Let's talk about this class a little bit, and where can the value be had? Let's talk about these guys in your trades. What are some trades that you guys have seen? I have seen Trey Lance for Fields and a first, which I think blows my mind, because I think Fields in that same process, if you put Fields in San Francisco, it's a smash accept, and that's the biggest thing. Justin Fields is now out of that purgatory of Matt Nagy, where they ran very, very minimal play action. Now we go to a system where, they were, last time he was calling plays, the coach was, 23%, a lot more involved when it comes to the RPOs and trying to get things where it's going to be a lot of systems where he can get some pre-snap reads and some things like that. Is Fields have similar type upside, or what kind of trades have you guys seen for Justin Fields and as well as Trey Lance or Trevor Lawrence at this point?
I can jump in here. I think the problem with Fields is that I don't see his value increasing very much over the next year. He's already being drafted in this tier he's on a terrible team. I know that Nagy's gone, but they just don't have the weapons for him. And Fields has always been a little bit overrated as a runner. He is a very good runner, but I don't expect to see him putting up 800 plus rushing yards. I believe last year he only had one game above 60 rushing yards. In college, he was not nearly as prolific as a rusher as a guy like Trey Lance. So to me, I think he has a lot of downside in his value. If he doesn't have a good season, all of a sudden he's Daniel Jones and he's being drafted in the 9th or 10th round of startups. Mm-hmm. So I would always transition off of Justin Fields into a guy like Russell Wilson or a guy like Jalen Hurts. Players who I think have, way higher floors and probably higher ceilings as well.
Adam, talk to me a little bit about that too, because I know you were debating in the startup some of those guys as well.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't see the upside, so I completely agree with the Fields take. I definitely would more prefer like Lawrence within that tier because we've already seen the floor, right? And certainly his value could go down, but I just think if you're talking about downside risk versus upside, I definitely like the risk-adjusted return upside with Lawrence. And I traded for him I traded down from Burrow in Smash 4 last month. I traded Burrow and Pollard for Lawrence, Akers, and Winston is what I did. So, trades like that where I can effectively, similar to the overall philosophy, right, of trying to trade down and trying to get better at other positions while also trying to get that upside. Winston's another guy that I think that has more insulation than it comes with. We can maybe talk about that later, but overall, like I'd rather have Lawrence or those other guys in that tier versus Fields, even though I love the talent. He's got a cannon of an arm. But certainly when you're talking about floor and upside, I definitely like other guys in that tier.
And Jacob, you made some trades for Fields. I saw John Helmkamp made a trade today, and I saw he put that out there, and he was stoked that he traded Justin Herbert for Justin Fields, Devonta Smith, and a 24 first, which you're putting a lot of faith in Justin Fields. Justin Fields has to hit for that to be a win. Jacob, where do you look at Fields in this potential year versus, a dynasty value?
Well, I actually have a much different perspective on Justin Fields. I understand that he's in a terrible situation right now. There's no way around it. His wide receiver one's Darnell Mooney. That being said, I trust that Justin Fields is going to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. Maybe it's just me, but I saw a lot of things to like as he developed throughout the season. I also think that he actually is a pretty mobile quarterback. It might not have been what they were doing last year when they were trying to teach him how to actually read defenses in the NFL. But he's got legs. He makes moves. I think he has just as much rushing upside as Trey Lance. And just because when Trey Lance was at North Dakota State, they actually didn't pass the ball very much, doesn't mean that he's somehow going to be a quarterback that is a run-first quarterback in the NFL. So I want to see Trey Lance play before I say that he has a higher floor, or higher ceiling than Justin Fields. Because for me, as a passer, Justin Fields probably has more upside. As a rusher, I need to see the usage of Trey Lance before I'm saying Trey Lance has more rushing upside than Justin Fields. So every single time I can get a late first value on top of Justin Fields for Trey Lance, I'm going to do that. I probably would take less, to be honest.
So we had Jordan McNamara on the show, and he was downplaying Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and saying, how much risk there is, and saying that basically any dynasty owner that takes them over Matthew Stafford is just foolish. Now, they're all in that second round. If you're given those three guys on the board, who are you taking here, Mung? If you still, given the risk analysis here on Lawrence, on Fields, and the upside of Stafford at his age increased, where would you go in that direction? Because that's I feel like a lot of our dynasty owners are getting there in that end of the second round. I mean, Lawrence sometimes in that 210 area, Stafford and Fields go in that early 3. If you're in that area, how much risk is there, and what kind of play are you making?
Yeah, I think it's fine to trade down to Stafford, particularly if you're contending, right? Because we know that he has good weapons in LA. He might not quite have as many passing touchdowns because they were really heavy on passing versus rushing with Akers out last year. But he's a safe, top 12-ish quarterback. And I think going back to Fields real quick, I think he has a tier 1 ceiling, right? If everything comes together for him, he can be also in that top tier. My issue with that is his floor is much lower because to me, the floor with Lance isn't necessarily even talent wise. It's the fact that the Niners are going to be a winning team. And winning teams neither have the draft capital nor the desire to look for a new quarterback. Whereas the Bears could be a bottom 3 team this year. And I don't think that they should or will draft another quarterback, but we simply don't know what the management is going to think. I mean, look at Josh Rosen, right? He got replaced after 1 year. He never even got a shot. And again, I'm not saying that will happen to Fields, but the possibility of that happening is there versus a Lance where at worst, I think the Niners are going to be like an 8, 9, 10 win team. And they're simply not going to be drafting another quarterback anytime soon. So, I mean, when you look at guys like Lawrence and Fields, understand that the floor is there of them getting replaced. And it's not that it's going to happen. It's that you simply don't know. Crazy things happen in the NFL. We haven't heard the strongest commitment from Bears or Jacksonville's management. And we've seen the Jaguars churn through quarterbacks over the decades. So, say what you will, even if you believe Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent, if they don't improve at a fairly good clip this season with Peterson calling the shots, there is a non-zero chance that Lawrence will be on the bench come 2023, considering how highly valued some of these quarterbacks in that class are coming out. So, I mean, if you want to trade down to Stafford, Stafford plus a second, if you can get that for Fields or Lawrence and you're a strong contender and let's say your QB1's like Lamar or something, I have no issue with that move.
Great analysis there, Mung. I appreciate that. Mike, Trevor Lawrence, and I know you got to jump off soon, but Trevor Lawrence, how many shares do you have? Because he was that guy that was clearly going 101. We did label him a generational talent, and he was phenomenal at Clemson. The upside is clearly there. I mean, he's oozing with it. They're trying to put some weapons in there, not necessarily exciting, with Kirk and things. But talk to me a little bit about what we just talked about with in that area of Lawrence, Fields, Stafford, which guy you're going, what kind of direction you're looking at, and who ultimately has that upside that you're looking for.
Yeah, this is a really tough one for me because I'm all about the upside of where someone's value could go. And just based on their age and their pedigree, Fields and Lawrence could be a first-round startup guy next year. They could be a top 6 startup pick. And there is just no scenario in the world that Stafford increases his value that significantly. He's 35 years old this season. But the thing is that Stafford scored 10 more points a game than Lawrence and Fields did last year. Lawrence and Fields barely scored 10 points a game. So if you're relying on them as your QB2 and God forbid your QB1, that could literally just destroy your season. So I totally am starting to come around on the idea that Stafford is that QB2 who is locked in, 20 plus fantasy points probably for the next 4 to 5 years. He can stand back there. He doesn't really need to move around. I don't see age being an issue. You are giving up some of the value upside, and that's why I would want something added on. I think the one strategy that you made earlier was trading a guy like Lawrence plus a second for Stafford plus a first or something like that, where I'm getting upside in another realm or another player I really like, because I don't want to just sacrifice upside. But I am coming around to the idea of a guy like Matthew Stafford. Basically, think about if you had bought Aaron Rodgers 5 years ago or Tom Brady 5 years ago. Despite the fact that their values never increased, you've gotten way more than your money's worth just in the amount of 20-plus point seasons that they've put up.
Well, and I bought Tom Brady 5 years ago for a late first in Superflex.
Yep.
We talked about on last week's pod. I saw a tweet that was 4 years old, said, what would you pay for Derrick Henry? It was 107. Guess what? That's almost what he's at now. We got to that. Tom Brady was that 5 years ago. People were like, oh, man, he's towards the twilight here. Let's give a late first. And I think Tom Brady is that ultimate stopgap where if you are going to take one of these guys, like you said, like a Lawrence, like a Fields, and you could throw a guy like that in Tom Brady, people still get upset when you show that you have Tom Brady on your team, and it's like, you don't have to pay a first anymore. You could pay 2 seconds. You could pay a second and, a wide receiver piece like a Nico Collins, like a, someone that's in that second round range where you can definitely add in there. Great analysis on that. I want to move a little bit into the discussion on 23 firsts, and we talk about this next group, this tier 5. I'm going to throw Rodgers out because Rodgers is a different kind of anomaly, but we got Tua, Carr, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson, and even Kirk Cousins. A 23 first. Who are you taking out of that group over a 23 first? We saw a lot of Twitter polls out there. For the most part, it's coming up that people are preferring the 23 first. And to me, there is a little bit of craziness in that, where if I can get a guy like Mac Jones who showed some serious upside, the Twitter polls that I'm seeing, people are preferring a late first over Mac Jones, a late first over Zach Wilson, a mid first over a guy like Tua Tagovailoa. Jacob, you're huge on Tua right now. If someone comes to you and they offer you a late 23 first for Tua in Superflex, what are you saying to him?
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I would need a top 2 pick in 2023 to move off Tua at least. There's Bijan Robinson I'd take over Tua, and that's it. You're talking about a quarterback who has the best weapon group in the NFL. He's now got Armstead at tackle. He got Connor Williams coming in there. And this was an offensive line that was the worst passing offensive line in the NFL last year. Now it's going to be one of the top groups. They just added pass catching running backs to Chase Edmonds, and they have a running game now with Raheem Mostert and Sony Michel there when they were using Salvin Ahmed and Myles Gaskin last year. It's a vastly improved offense. And Tua Tagovailoa has been really good with a bad situation. As a rookie, he was coming off a hip injury and had Isaiah Ford catching passes from as his wide receiver 2 and Jakeem Grant as his wide receiver 1. That's terrible. And then in his second year, we had no offensive line, and he was still top 3 in release rate and ball placement. So you're talking about one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL already, even when he's under pressure. And now he's got a hell of an arsenal. So Tua's, you dream for your quarterbacks that you draft to have a situation like Tua does. And we can't forget that Tua was going to be a Heisman winner if Alabama didn't bench him every fourth quarter. This is a phenomenal prospect in a great situation now. I'm all in on Tua.
I love it. You knew I was going to set you up and give you a little shot to plug in there. Mike, before you leave, I'm going to give you a shot to plug Mac here, because if I come to you right now and I offer you, say, like the 108 next year for Mac Jones, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I'm declining that offer. People say Mac Jones has no upside because he doesn't run the ball. Which is fair. He's not going to be a top 5 quarterback in anyone's dynasty rankings probably ever, which is fine. But I really am confident that he can be a low-end QB1. Look at how bad the rookie quarterbacks were last year. Look at how bad they are most year. Mac Jones led the rookie quarterbacks in basically every statistic, and that was versus guys like Fields and Lawrence and and other players who were very highly touted. Mac Jones is incredibly accurate. I think he's improved a lot over this last offseason. And I think saying that he has no upside is just people obsessed with the Konami quarterbacks, which I am too. Don't get me wrong. But if it's going to be a late first next year, I'm taking a guy who I don't know if he's even going to make it in the NFL. It's probably not a quarterback at that point if it's the 108, 109 in a rookie draft. So I'm taking the wide receiver 4, who's going to be a 5th round startup pick. I'm not gaining extra value, and I'm losing on the fact that I think Mac Jones, you can lock him in as your QB2 with some upside for the next 10 years. I think he's established himself. He will be a starting quarterback in 2032, and I think that matters a lot.
And when we had Matt Waldman on, he said his comp was a poor man's Peyton Manning. When you say anything Peyton Manning, a guy that's going to be consistent. I took him in Scott Fishbowl. I was super excited. If you take away that Buffalo game where he threw the ball 3 times and we put that perception in people's head, if you take that out, I feel like the upside thing disappears a little bit more, because if you look at some of the other stats, they weren't gaudy, but that game totally just negated everybody's thoughts. Speaking of Scott Fishbowl, Adam, you took Derek Carr, in the late second. Tons of upside with Derek Carr this year. Someone comes to you with a what pick does it have to be for you to take to give up Derek Carr for a 23 first?
Yeah, obviously roster dependent always, but certainly I think he has that upside, especially adding Devontae Adams. I think adding Josh McDaniels as the head coach and the offensive mind onto that offense certainly it helps his ceiling. So, I kind of picture him as very similar as we're talking about with Mac just now, of just a really locked in floor of a low end QB1 with, I would probably say, top 7 upside. Because there's now you're talking about the potential of having much more passing rate and then touchdown upside with the new makeup of that offense. So for me, a late 23 first I'm passing on. Now, if it's a mid, and again, if I'm 1 year punt, or then I would consider it. So that's kind of my line in the sand there when you're talking about when I'm taking a 23 first. It's probably more of a mid. I'm passing on the late.
I love it. Mung, close it out with you here. If we have Tua, Carr, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson, who's that guy you got to have out of that group?
Yeah, so not to be a Debbie Downer, I think they're all going to hate me for saying this. I think the ceiling cases are all there for these guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Tua's got Tyreek and Waddle, probably the 2 fastest wide receivers in the league right now. And not only fast, but they're good route runners as well, right? So they're truly like super weapons loaded up for him. They made upgrades to the offensive line. I don't know that they're more than above average with the upgrades, but certainly a marked improvement upon 2021. Derek Carr, obviously, they went out and got him Devontae Adams, healthy Darren Waller, Renfro. And then, you look at who's the last one? Sorry, Mac Jones, right? Matt Waldman called him a Peyton Manning light, or with that potential. And the only problem with Mac Jones is instead of, Reggie Wayne, he's got Tyquan Thornton and Jacoby Myers. So, and he's also got a head coach who isn't afraid to give the ball to a nameless running back at the 2-yard line rather than pad back stats. And then when you look at the upside cases for these, I think they can all be top 12, even top 10 fantasy quarterbacks. I think that the gap is just so large between quarterbacks who don't run anymore in fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is I never see a truly elite upside case for them, right? I mean, how many years did it take Tom Brady to become the focal point of his offense under Belichick? The Patriots can be successful for the next decade, and Mac Jones could never finish as more than a top 6, top 7 fantasy quarterback. I mean, even looking at Matthew Stafford, right? A huge boost going to the Rams last year, threw for over 40 touchdowns for the first time in like a decade, and he still finished outside of the top 5 quarterbacks, and that was with some injuries to guys like Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't see a truly elite case for these quarterbacks, or if there is, like, so many things have to go right versus, pay for a guy like Stafford who can give you probably similar back-end QB1 production, or even guys like Rodgers or Brady, where you're paying for that 1-year rental for similar production. And really the guys between QB8 and QB16 are all only separated by a couple of points per game versus that extra 5 or 6 points per game, 2 guys who can run the football and rush for those 6-point touchdowns in 4-point passing leagues like Lamar and Kyler and Lance and Hurts.
I love it. This podcast has been fun. Normally we shoot it like right at an hour, and that's about it. We've done an hour and 12 minutes of just awesome Superflex, content. These are the guys that I ask for trade advice. I talk to Jacob and Mung and Adam and Mike all the time. Jacob, I got to say thank you for coming on. It's the first we've ever had some face-to-face interaction after several years. Thanks again for coming in. Tell everybody again where they can find you, where they can find your work, and maybe one thing you're excited for since we are almost into the NFL season.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking some ball with you guys. You can find me at Dynasty Jacobian on Twitter, or also on the Trading Table podcast, where Dynasty Zoltan and I talk trades all the time. One thing I'm looking forward to this offense, there's a lot of things. I really want to see how the Seattle running back room shakes out and see if the Rashad Penny truthers win, or if my boy Kenneth Walker stakes his claim. There's a lot, though. Josh Jacobs is finally going to prove everybody wrong. So, a lot.
I love it. Hey, Mung, I saw you had another article over there at Fantrax about your boy. We were talking several weeks out, about being a potential breakout, and the writing is on the wall for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be coming up with updated redraft and dynasty rankings pretty soon over the next few days with all the news updates over training camp. I'm going to try not to overreact too much, but certainly excited already about some of the reports coming out of these training camps. But yeah, I mean, always happy to talk all things fantasy, DFS, betting, whatever it is on Twitter. You guys know you can find me at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
And guys, I got to put a push out there. Adam does not have enough followers. Adam has literally been grinding and doing some awesome stuff for Smash Accept. So Adam, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and anything that you're working on right now?
Yeah, thanks, Dad. Appreciate being on the conversation. And on Twitter, it's R_Adam Armour. That's ARMOUR. And just love talking Dynasty, love talking trades, boys. And appreciate you including me. And yeah, hit me a shout with some trade, requests. But also, I threw out, especially if there's some new leagues or new opportunities to join a league with us. We'll be tweeting them out. So appreciate it.
Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.